Don't matter what your name is, share your story. We'll be waiting, yeah, for the haters, whoa.
Like in season 2. All right. What's up, guys, and welcome back to For the Haters podcast. We're happy to have you guys here. Today we have a special guest. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Adrienne Nolan Smith, and I am a board-certified patient advocate, speaker, and the founder of something called Wellbe, which is Get Wellbe on all social channels and our website. And Wellbe is really focused on helping people to prevent chronic health issues, and when they come up, heal them naturally. And we help them do that by helping people implement wellness in their lives and also navigate the healthcare system when things come up, because it's pretty hairy out there in the conventional system. And in my experience, which we'll talk about, the integrative and functional medicine world was really, I think, the future of how healthcare should be practiced. And so because of that, I really help people to, as a board certified patient advocate, I can help people to get to those kinds of practitioners and doctors who I think will really help people to heal rather than just Band-Aid or, manage symptoms with pill for an ill type stuff.
Awesome. Just if you guys are new listening, my name is Becky. I am the host. We also have Laura here.
What's up?
Who is the co-founder for The Haters. So when you came to us with your story, there was a lot of, it's interesting because for us, we're doing this for a reason, right? There wasn't, there was things that we went through that wanted us to start this, and, that is relatable to your story as well. So you didn't just come about to wanting to care more about wellness and down that path. There was a reason that brought you here.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
A few reasons. One was the most impactful, but I have a few life experiences and work experiences that got me here.
Yeah. I think maybe if you want to start out by talking about maybe your childhood and, going through Lyme's disease.
Sure. So yeah, my sort of journey with wellness and, hippie woo-woo, integrative, holistic, whatever the hell it's, can we curse?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Is that even a curse word? I don't know. Whatever kind of medicine you want to call it, alternative, complement, whatever. That all started with my diagnosis of chronic Lyme disease when I was 11. Chronic Lyme disease means that you've had it long enough for the antibiotics to not really be effective anymore. And it's actually, unfortunately, most cases of Lyme, that's the case, because people generally don't really even see the bullseye that you get that, shows you sort of have Lyme, and you can treat it quickly with antibiotics. So, my mom treated me, or rather sent me to a doctor who treated me with antibiotics. They didn't work. And basically that was the only option that we were given. It was either more or different antibiotics, or antibiotics through an IV instead of, a pill or whatever. That was it. And my mom had some, kind of health issues herself, but had grown up like a Navy brat, eating white bread and Spam. She by no means was kind of raised to understand the world of natural medicine or holistic medicine. And yet I think living in New York City and having therefore access and proximity to some of them, and then feeling herself like so not great, especially after having kids. I think she had a lot of gut and hormone issues. I know she did. So, what generally happens is after pregnancy, if you have issues, they exacerbate. So she started to look into these different kinds of, therapies and medicines. And so when she heard that there was nothing left to do except more and more of a treatment that didn't seem to be effective, and from what she could find, endless antibiotics kind of destroy your gut. And she was way ahead of her time. I mean, we didn't even talk about the microbiome or gut health until, the microbiome project finished, which was only a couple years ago. Now it's like you hear it constantly, like bone broth and, at least I do. I'm in the wellness world, all that stuff, collagen. Broth, yeah. I mean, everyone's, kimchi, whatever. But back then it really was not talked about at all. And so she sort of said, well, why would I want to destroy this child's immune system and gut over and over and over, like she's going to be so susceptible to the Lyme either coming back or like another infection that's just going to wipe her out. So she said no thanks, and really started me down this path of these different natural therapies for 2 years. There were so many of them. I won't get into
It was you and your
them.
brother, right?
Me and my brother. Yeah. He was actually the reason that I got diagnosed at all. He was much more, and I say much more sick because his symptoms were so much more pronounced than mine. But that actually apparently doesn't mean it's worse. It just means that people have different symptoms. And, the same way that like two people that have arthritis, one can have really bad joint pain and not much skin stuff, and another one it's like all skin stuff and like a little bit of joint pain. So it's really hard to say. But I had a lot of memory loss issues, like short-term memory. Like I'd look at a piece of paper, I'd look at your face, you tell me your name, it's Becky. I'd look away, I'd be like, what? Like, who are you? Or not who are you, but what's your name?
Yeah.
Like, I'd look at a number on a paper, look away, no idea what that was, which is weird for a kid. You start to really like, am I going crazy? Like what? Why?
And it's interesting too because I'm sure in New York City that's not something that typically comes up, right? Lyme's, you're not like in the woods, you're not really susceptible to ticks being everywhere. Where I'm from, if someone was sick, it was like, is it Lyme's? Because there was just ticks everywhere.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting because my family has a beach cottage in Lyme, Connecticut, where Lyme disease was first found. So it's pretty prevalent out there, and it was really interesting, and it just shows the times. Like they still have really bad testing, and there are so few Lyme literate doctors that even though we were exposed in a place with tons of Lyme disease, and New York City is surrounded by places with tons of Lyme, the Hamptons, New Jersey, every part of Connecticut is just infested. It was still like, oh, that's weird, you have joint pain. I mean, they told my mom over and over that my brother just had growing pains, even though he was buckled over, screaming, grabbing his knees, middle of the night, probably every week or every 2 weeks in the emergency room with debilitating joint pain. And the doctor's just being like, we think it's joint pain, take Advil,
Yeah.
Did you and your brother contract this around the same time?
No, I was a couple of years after him. But it was, so anyway, we were both being treated at the same time because it was discovered at the same time. But it was a weird 2 years of my life, and longer for him. He got better. It took a couple more years. But we both are fine today. And I feel extremely lucky because there are Lyme patients who are suffering for like decades. They just never get better. I mean, they're just attached to like a port. They're just kind of like invalids. I mean, it's really, and then they'll get a little bit better and then relapse, and then a little bit better and relapse. Whereas I haven't had that experience, which has been great. And I really owe it to my mom being like such a ferocious researcher and fighter to not take no for an answer and try every weird thing.
You went out and like traveled the country to go and find.
Exactly. Yeah. We were in a tiny, tiny town in Minnesota for 3 weeks. One summer, we were in Lancaster, Pennsylvania for like another 3 weeks. The second summer, I was still sick, doing these treatments, doctors all over the place. She followed every lead. Not all of them resulted in something effective. But that's the kind of interesting part about natural medicine in general and natural therapies is that they're really just supporting your immune system to finally get strong enough to overcome said whatever it is, which is actually finally now being used in like, conventional healthcare. Immunotherapy drugs for cancer is like the new hot thing in cancer. And that basically means drugs that then enable your immune system to figure out there's cancer in your body and then go attack it. So it's like brilliant in that sense. It's still like pretty new, but that's basically where cancer treatments are going. And so the good part about that is that there's, not really side effects the same way that drugs have. But the bad thing is that you have to do them kind of all in conjunction to really get your immune system strong enough to finally kick that thing. And so sometimes it's hard to know like which one of those things really did it, because you kind of have to keep doing them all together. It's kind of like if you do a diet change that heals something, it's like, was it just that I took out the gluten or the dairy or that I added more vegetables? Like, no, dude, it's all of the things together, because you have to support your immune system in like every which way. It's not usually one. So I'm not really sure which one of the therapies that I did was the most effective, but we were doing a lot, in conjunction, and I was better after 2 years.
Do you, is that what you remember like prominently from your childhood? Trying to, I'm trying to think of what the word is, like trying to get better from being sick.
If you ask my brother that, he would say yes, that was his whole childhood, but it was 2 years out of 17 or 18 for me. So
yeah,
no, health has been a large part of my life. I never thought I'd be working in health and wellness. Like if you told me that even 10 years ago, I would have laughed at you, but it's always been a big part of my life. I've been that friend that people go to for any kind of help that they, come across with, mostly related to integrative medicine stuff, but also any kind of wellness thing or just healthcare stuff in general, because I've been through it a lot, not just with my own health, but with my mom's, which we'll talk about too. But yeah, it didn't define it because, I was a really healthy kid until I was 10 or 11. But then, when I look back this is a bit of a tangent, but I did this emotional freedom technique thing, which was crazy. These 6 sessions last January with this practitioner over the phone. And one of the things that came out, it was so weird. I thought she was a total quack. I was ready to just throw in the towel. I did not think that it was effective or whatever. But at the 4th session, I had this amazing release. I mean, I couldn't even breathe. I was crying so hard, and I'm really not a crier. And I didn't know what was going on, but basically what came out was that I have a slight scoliosis, and I've always kind of had some back pain and stuff, and never really thought that much about it. But basically she figured out this pain I'd held in my body and my back especially was really linked to being this age, being 11, and just starting to go through all this stuff with my health and Lyme, and then not getting to do all the things that my friends were going to do because I had to do all these treatments, and kind of just getting frustrated with my mom for making me do all these things because I thought it was all, her, not, in hindsight, obviously I thank God for her. But at the time you're an angsty tween, Mom, I just want to go, everyone else is going to this, whatever, I want to go there, I don't want to go to Minnesota, stay in a Motel 6 with you and my annoying little brother for 3 weeks. So yeah, I mean, I would say that was surprising to me and really interesting, because it's something I never thought of as being kind of this unresolved childhood trauma, that I held pain in my body for decades related to this time of feeling different, of things kind of falling apart, just a lot of my parents didn't end up having a great marriage, but that was also when I remember them fighting a lot about our care and just a lot of stuff, and it does affect you more than you realize, because clearly I'd been hanging on to it for
a while. Yeah. And that's something, and that's why I asked the question, because I know that there's definitely people listening that are holding something on from their childhood, not realizing, because people can, hide something so well that they almost think that it's not real. And so people are holding on to this rather than, dealing with it. And it's so important to release,
oh my gosh, yes,
maybe unheard of anger that's, lingering inside of you.
Yeah. I mean, I literally thought this woman was, if you had told me that she was going to pull this memory out of me and it was linked to my back pain, whatever, I would have been what are you talking?
That's so crazy. That's so interesting.
I've had things in my life that, you would think of as real traumas, not real traumas, that you would think of as traumatic, right? This didn't seem to me that traumatic, right? And yet, especially because around that time also my mom and my relationship got not as close. It was sort of this you're like, you have to take your vitamins, you have to do this and that. And then she was such a like, stop, telling me what to do, stop making me do all these therapies, like, wanting to just be a normal kid. And
I think that is traumatizing, though.
yeah,
You
I
know,
mean,
and
clearly
you-
it was.
Right. I mean, you internalize it to the point where it was a physical manifestation of
Exactly.
your stress. So it's,
Yeah. It was wild to me. So, I mean, I guess the lesson here for anybody that hasn't done that EFT type work or doesn't really think that they have any buried childhood traumas is that a lot of times it's not something you think of as traumatic. And that there's 17 layers to everything. And so I had to kind of keep going backwards and digging into this, like this back injury, or not even injury, my scoliosis, and then I was like seeing a chiropractor. Okay. And then like, what's a memory from that? And it sort of involved my mom, but it was hard to figure out why I had it. And then the next thing I know, I'm like, can't breathe and hysterical. And it is not because like, now my mom isn't around or it wasn't the feeling of like missing her or something like that. It was all this like just pain of feeling kind of this rejection or being different or these like really basic human emotions that people don't want to feel, right? Like being different or being rejected or not being loved or being scared or not safe or whatever. That like I had to keep going and going and going to even know that I had them. And even then being like, what? Like it was weird. So sometimes you need to kind of keep pulling the onion back.
Yeah, the onion.
Yeah. And like, okay, so what was, so you have that memory, but like, what was really going on there, and kind of keep going back, and slowly but surely you could release something that you didn't know was going on. And because of the way we understand inflammation in the body, these chronic or not chronic, but these unresolved childhood traumas are often the source of a lot of disease later in life, because they're just stagnating negative energy. And negative energy is like one of the many different sources. Of course, there's like crappy food and this and that,
Sure.
or like pollution. Those are all sources of inflammation. And inflammation is what leads to every single chronic disease there is, like all cancers, all heart disease, all of that. And so if you can get rid of that stuff, not only does it make for obviously a happier, freer existence, but you're also potentially saving yourself the heartache of future disease and all the financial and emotional burden that comes with that for you and your family. So I think it's really worth doing.
It's a shame how much people discount energy as being like a leading cause of exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, I always talk about it or think about it because it's hard for me too. I mean, I'm hard on myself. I hear the negative crap I tell myself, and it's hard to stop that. But I try to remind myself that your body, everything that you say to each other, or rather everything that you say to yourself, your body is hearing. You're trapped in the same place, right? You can't get away from it. And so if you have these disempowering beliefs or these negative thoughts or these stagnating traumas that you haven't resolved that are leading you to have these disempowering beliefs, right? Like if you had something that happened when you were a kid that made you feel unsafe or unloved, you may manifest that all your life, of making weird decisions, like staying with somebody in a relationship because they make you feel safe even if somehow they're actually horrible for you, or you stay in a job you hate forever because you're scared of change and risk.
Comfort, right.
Because you want to be comfortable, you want to feel safe, like things like that, both of those examples, all of that can really be because you didn't get rid of some of this stuff initially. So it's amazing how much it can play out in different ways.
Have you ever read the book The Secret?
No. Sounds like I need to.
Well, no, it's like, so it's kind of corny, but it's corny with a purpose. It just basically talks about energy and like what you put out into the world is what you're going to receive. So, the way you speak to yourself, the constant positive reinforcements, you're manifesting what's going to happen by the energy that you put out.
Law of
I
attraction.
totally
law of
believe
attraction.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
yet
that's
it
what
is
the whole book is based off of. That's honestly, it makes you, the one thing, at least for me, what I took from it, it automatically made me realize when I was thinking negatively, because I was almost afraid of what was going to happen from those negative thoughts. So it like just forced me to change my thought in any way that I could, because it like scared me into thinking that those things were going to come true if I kept thinking about
That's
them.
I was just going to say, I know that to be true. And yet it's still really hard for me to be positive enough to manifest positivity, you know, like,
It's an interesting scare tactic.
it's,
if you think of it like that.
I haven't been scared, or I haven't scared myself, and I'm absolutely going to start doing that tonight to make myself, because what I've been doing isn't
You're
working.
welcome.
So
And that's I mean, obviously everyone gets something different out of the book. I bought the audio version, so I'll listen to it in the car, but it, you know, it talks about like everything, like even like losing weight. Like if you keep telling yourself you're not going to lose weight, then you're not going to lose weight regardless of what you do. If you tell yourself something's going to work, it's going to work. You know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
That's why how many times have you heard
Many.
me say
Probably every
that
other episode.
I'm going to like I'm going to win the lottery, and I say that all the
She
time.
doesn't play it, but
No, I don't.
she's gonna win it.
But I am going to win
one
it.
slight issue with not playing it, it
Yeah,
makes it.
I always say I do have to
win
start
it.
playing, but I do actively talk about winning the lottery because it's going to happen one day.
Well, you might also win a very different kind of lottery.
yeah,
you
and
know?
I've said that too. So, but yes, you should read the book and let me know.
That
how you
sounds
f-
great.
It
yeah.
sounds like it's right up.
Well,
your
I'm
alley.
just gonna start scaring myself tonight because that sounds like a really good plan. I'll let you know how that goes.
Yeah, it's and to kind of bring us back to something that you said, it's interesting to me to hear that you would think that your brother would, you know, react differently to his thought process on, you know, your childhood, because you both basically lived kind of like similar childhoods, and I wonder if because he actively feels the way that you haven't felt, it's almost like been better or worse for him. Right? Because you've suppressed it. So you didn't feel it until now, but he's aware of it. So I don't know.
Well, we didn't. It's a long story, but
Yeah.
he was so sick that he was taken out of school when he was 9, and he never really went back to school until he went to college. So I never was taken out of school. My school was extremely understanding during those 2 years, and I was just late constantly and like had to take random naps and like here and there. But I got through it, and I had a pretty normal, you know, like high school experience after that. Because I got better by the time I was about 13. So then my high school experience was pretty normal. And then that made my college experience more normal. And like I was a regular socialized kid,
yeah.
teen, whatever. Whereas he spent so much time really isolated that it just made going to college very intimidating and weird to be around. You know, just a very different.
Probably jarring. I mean, how
It
do you go
was.
from essentially being homeschooled, right?
Yeah,
to
for like 10
thrown
years.
into a
Yeah.
social environment. You have no idea. You don't have the skills that equip you to
Right. And the
handle it.
last time that you were socialized, you were 9. So like you really, you're like almost, you know, you're a 9-year-old, but you're in college and you're like, how do you do this? You know? So he had a very different experience in that way. So I would say that, you know, even though I was not quite cognizant of how that affected me and kind of like thought it was no big deal and it was this buried emotion, he was more aware, but he had a lot more trauma from it. Like it was,
Are you guys still close?
oh yeah, I talked to him for an hour today.
Good. That's
Yeah.
good. You know, next I would love to kind of hear more about the transition with your mom. I know it happened like later in your life, which is, you know, I was telling her today, I didn't know much, you know, about it. So I looked everything up and I didn't realize that things could happen later in life. And if you want to just explain it, because people are probably like, what? Like, what's going on?
Oh
It's
yeah.
a good tease, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So my mom, as I mentioned, you know, she had gut issues and hormonal issues but, you know, wasn't diagnosed with any sort of major chronic health issue. She had like Epstein-Barr virus and chronic fatigue and things like that, but, you know, was otherwise seen as like a pretty functioning human. But when I was in college, the summer I graduated from college, she had a massive like manic episode. and ended up having a full-blown, delusions, paranoia, thought people were like trying to kill her, that God was talking to her, like your usual kind of like full-blown like, wow, this is a mental illness situation, which was terrifying. And my parents had divorced when I was a freshman in college. And so at that point, it was me and my two brothers who were kind of trying to figure out what to do with her. And, the whole thing really started like in this crazy chase through the New York City subway system because she thought we were like trying to kill her. And it was like late at night, and we, ran all the way to Queens. We, didn't really know where we were going. And my brother had to like put her in a, kind of like a human straitjacket and hold her until we didn't know what to do. We called the police, just because we knew that it wasn't safe for her to like, she would just keep trying to run away from us. So us trying to take her home wouldn't really work. She would just like get out. So we called the police. They came with an ambulance. They took her away, and we like really had no idea where she was going, or what was going to happen next. And we had never seen the mental health care system before ever, and didn't know what to expect. And it was just this crazy, you feel like you're in a movie. I mean, it was like, is this really my family and my life? Like, what is happening? Like, and you just start trying to, do whatever you can after that. And so it was 3.5 years of her being in these different inpatient programs in mental health facilities. Both the really scary kind of state ones that they send, like, they feel like jails basically, all the way to some more kind of like nicer private mental hospitals, and everything in between. And I mean, it's just so many crazy things happened in those 3 years. Like she was
diagnosed schizophrenic at that point. Yeah.
She was diagnosed schizoaffective.
Okay.
So it's just like schizophrenia. It just means like a collection of symptoms. They have absolutely no idea what causes those
just put a word
symptoms.
out.
Exactly. It's like irritable bowel syndrome. Okay, what's irritating your bowel?
So they cannot pinpoint what incites a schizophrenic episode.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
And they can with patients who are actual, like people who have schizophrenia, like full-blown schizophrenia, they can better pinpoint what incites an episode?
Oh,
or
no, neither.
Oh, neither.
Yeah, neither.
So what's the difference in verbiage then?
Schizoaffective is just kind of more of a combination of schizophrenia and like a mood disorder.
Okay.
Whatever that is, which is kind of bipolar disorder.
Sure.
Like it's all kind of, they don't really know. But
Okay, so-
schizophrenics just have like a little bit of a different set of symptoms, apparently. But it's very, very close to schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder. And so that's what she was diagnosed with. And they just plowed the most insanely powerful antipsychotic drugs into her and different mood stabilizing drugs, and just turned her into a complete vegetable.
Before that, she was pretty self-sufficient.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
she was in her mid 50s, and I mean, my mom had been in the first class of women at Columbia Business School. Wow. She was a management consultant, like very, very capable. She was a stay-at-home mom for a long time, but she was like very, very intelligent and capable. Mm-hmm. So she was, seeing her go from that to a vegetable was very bizarre, because she wasn't even close to that age where you start kind of feeling like your parents are getting older. Like She was just still, a totally functioning adult. Mm-hmm. And she was shaking and drooling and having trouble, like sort of slurring her words because of the drugs, and then having trouble sleeping. And so then they, give her sleep meds, and then the sleep meds cause different side effects. And then, basically there was like another drug for every single side effect, but they had so many side effects that it was like a cocktail of whatever.
Of everything.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a nightmare. And, had I'd known this is how they treated this sort of thing, I'm not sure what I would have done, but it really wasn't a better solution. Like it wasn't a solution. It was just a different kind of misery. Like instead of her being manic, she was just a vegetable and not able to really do anything.
Right.
So it was just very disappointing, and also like, oh, like I wish I'd known some of this.
Yeah.
Like maybe we would have taken a different path or something.
I remember hearing, I listened to like a couple of your interviews before, and I remember you talking about how it was difficult to manage, you know, becoming the caregiver of someone that has cared for you. I think I remember hearing you say that. And I think that is a case for a lot of people, that people don't realize that that's a transition that is going to happen for us. You know, do you specifically remember how you were able to handle that transition, or anything that like helped you?
Not well. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm the only girl in my family, and because of my brother being sick and stuff, like I think I already felt like I had some caretaker type personality traits. And I would say that, you know, you're kind of shocked into action in that situation. You know, you're just kind of, I mean, once you get a really intense diagnosis and you feel like everything's going a mile a minute like that, or have a manic episode or something, like an accident, a car accident, if that happens to somebody, like you're just in go mode. You don't even have time to think. You're just doing what you got to do. And so but once that settles down and you actually realize like, oh my gosh, I'm like an ongoing caretaker in this scenario for somebody who used to take care of me, it's one, you feel like of course you're going to do it because they took care of you. But it's also, you know, you feel there's a little bit of victimhood, I will say. I remember feeling like, why is this happening to me? You know, like all my other friends, you know, their parents are like still married. Their parents take care of them. Like they can just have fun, go to college, work, like do whatever they want, watch football on the weekends. Like, why me? Why am I doing this? Like, why am I dealing with all these doctors and research? And like, why can't I just, like, I already just went through this painful, like my parents getting divorced and Lyme, like just enough already, you know? But that is really not helpful. Being a victim doesn't help anything.
Yeah.
So, had to kind of kick that and just realize, like, you know, my family, I've had a very fortunate life in other ways that other people maybe haven't, with, you know, access to opportunities or college or, you know, whatever. And I do have a strong family despite, you know, some dysfunction there, or it being, you know, a broken up family. And had the support of also my uncle, who was my mom's brother, who also stepped in and became her legal guardian and helped as well. And so it just kind of like stop with the victim stuff and just, you have a job to do, and you were, you know, chosen for this job. I don't know exactly what I believe in, but I feel like there's some kind of spiritual existence out there, and things happen very much for a reason. And like, whatever this is, you're going to learn from it. There's a reason it's happening. Just do it, you know, just do the right thing. And then I would say, you know, making sure that you don't become just, I think this is like parents in general. Once the table turned and felt like I was sort of like her parent, I did a lot of like, okay, if you just do this or don't do that, or, you know, there's a lot of like trying to give instruction, or like, I know you don't feel great about this, but here's what you're going to do to like get out of this. Or you know, you end up just kind of giving so much instruction that you lose that sense of compassion or empathy, or just kind of putting
it becomes
yourself
like by rote almost.
Yeah, or the same way that like your parents don't, you know, let's talk about like when you're a tween or something, right? There's so much like, you have to get good grades and you have to do this and clean up your room and, you know, this and that and get home by 11, and you're kind of like always they're just at you all the time. And you stop being cute, right? So they stop being compassionate or like loving, because they're not able to kind of, or they're not, you know, some parents do a good job of this, but others don't, which is putting themselves in your shoes of how hard it is to go through all the transitions that happen at that age, and how much you're trying to like become an independent person. And so when you're like, get off my back, mom, like it's also like coming from a place of like, that's just the nature of that age. You know, you're not like a bad person or whatever. And I kind of look back and think I could have done a lot better job with that.
With keeping compassion there.
With keeping compassion. Because people who are going through any kind of chronic illness, especially mental illness, they're not really in control, you know? And so the choices that they're making or the way that they're feeling or the way that they're acting isn't them, you know, it's a dysregulation in the brain from either or hormonal imbalance or a viral and bacterial infection or whatever it might be that's accumulated enough to cause this mental illness. Obviously they're not thinking in their right mind, you know, it's not. And so there was a lot of me being like, why don't you just like do this and do that? And her being like, I can't stop drooling. Like, why don't you not, you know, she didn't say that particularly, but looking back, I'm thinking like I needed to have so much more compassion to what she was going through and just kind of be supportive and be there for her and not just like in fix it mode, because I was like, this is my job to get you better. And we're going to, in order for that to happen, you have to do X, Y, and Z. So every time I talk to you or see you, I'm just going to be talking about X, Y, and Z and not like just spending time with her.
It sounds like you almost sort of made it about your job performance.
Exactly.
Instead
I was
of-
like the coach or the,
Right.
you know, instructor or the whatever, rather than like, I'm still your daughter and like
Right.
you're still going through a tough time and deserve someone to just love you and be there for you and not just make it all about the project ahead of us, which was
But
to
it's
get you better.
hard not to like measure your success by her progress, especially when it's your mother and you want to see her progress. I mean, I don't know how you would have gone about that any differently.
Yeah. And I go back to this like parent analogy, right? Like if you're like a shitty teenager with causing a lot of problems in school and whatever, your parents feel responsible, like they screwed up or they didn't do a good enough job getting you, you know, up, you know, to be an upstanding citizen. And the same thing, like if she wasn't progressing or she had a relapse, which she had several of, or just had this total like loss of hope, then like I wasn't doing enough. And that is a weird line to navigate. Like just, you got to be there for people that you're taking care of. And also you got to get them better. So yeah, it's really hard.
I think it's just an amazing point to bring up. I mean, you know, it hits home with me. My dad has dementia, so it's almost the same situation that we're in right now is, you know, finding this compassion rather than anger, right? Because, you know, he's doing and saying things that he doesn't quite mean or can control. And so rather than getting angry, which, you know, is your first reaction to do, you have to kind of like take a step back and, you know, breathe and remember like what's going on. So, you know, with you saying that all, it like I said, it hits home and it makes me just reassures the compassion that I need to be giving in this situation. So I appreciate you saying all that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry to hear that. And
Yeah.
so what's interesting though with both dementia and schizoaffective disorder is, and this is what made it so frustrating for me, the more research I did, the more I understand that like everyday action impacts those diseases and most diseases, right? So if she, like I said, she had gut trouble and whatever, like I knew that if she was able to really take care of herself, and really, really heal through, you know, food and these other gut healing protocols, she could maybe turn this situation around. But yet she was feeling so terrible on these drugs that she had no motivation to do anything, and just started to give up hope. And so that was also challenging when you know that what somebody eats or what they're doing could make a difference in them getting better. Like, you know, Alzheimer's can often have the diet component.
Yeah.
And yet you're like, I also just need to be compassionate to the fact that he's a sick person and like he might just need to eat what he wants to eat at this point, or
Yeah.
you know,
He's changed quite a bit from, you know, he stopped smoking, he stopped drinking Gatorade, he just drinks water, and there's been active changes.
So that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, so you can see some progress there, but if he was like refusing to do any of that,
Yeah.
it would be hard. You know, it's a little hard to like give
Absolutely.
compassionate, because you know how much it matters. So it's so hard to both give that compassion and not. But looking back, that's one thing I would have done so much more of, is just try to constantly remind myself that human beings that are struggling need love more than they need anything else.
Yeah.
And to just like have that be first and foremost, and then my, caretaker kind of drill sergeant role be secondary.
Yeah.
So earlier on, we had touched on how childhood trauma and childhood stress can accumulate and, kind of snowball into a physical manifestation later down the road, and sometimes a mental one. And you've, known that to be true for yourself. For your mom, like, could that have been the case? Is that why she had an episode so much later on in life? It was just this buildup that she hadn't been addressing?
Totally. Yes. Looking back, I mean, I'm such an investigator. A lot of what I do for WellBe is health research and investigative guides. And I just can't help myself but kind of dig into root causes of everything. And, mental illness generally doesn't have one root cause, although there's some very interesting things linked to schizophrenia, like toxoplasmosis. Do you know that parasite that's in cat feces? So there's this parasite, and it's like,
I don't know if I want to know.
Yeah, she's got two.
do you really? Okay, well, if you ever start seeing signs of mental illness in your family, you might get them
They
tested.
poop outside a lot. They don't poop inside.
Okay, that's good, because
Okay.
it has to do also like people that touch. That's why pregnant women can't handle kitty litters, because the toxoplasmosis.
I did not know
I
that.
didn't know that either.
Yeah. So anyway, it's very interesting. There'll be some things like that where it's very directly correlated to mental illness, but often it's more of an accumulation of toxins in the body. And toxins can be childhood traumas. It can be more acute traumas like a PTSD from a war situation, or, an active shooter situation or something like that. But also it can be environmental toxicity. It can be these gut-related viruses, parasites, things like that. And looking back, she definitely had, like I mentioned, gut issues, sort of, I think, parasites. And she had hormonal imbalances and thyroid dysfunction. But she also had unresolved childhood trauma and had an alcoholic mother. And she had a lot of emotional baggage from her childhood. And she really never dealt with it. And she was one of those people who would, do everything that you might need to get your health better, but she had very low self-esteem. And so I don't think she thought she was worthy of good health. I knew so much about how to eat, but then of course would like not eat those foods with us. We'd get fed all these like super nutritious, whatever. And then she would like binge eat ice cream in the middle of the night or starve herself because she was overweight, and like just weird behavior with food. And same thing with, mental health. The things that we know can help with childhood trauma, things like talk therapy, emotional freedom technique, meditation, spiritual guidance, like all these different tactics. She didn't employ any of them. And, I mentioned my parents didn't have a great marriage. They went to some counseling, and my dad kind of saw that a lot of her issues had to do with childhood stuff, and she still, like, it was just too painful. She just couldn't go there. The idea of going in there was seen as an attack. She was very defensive. And because of that, these, like I said, this stagnating negative energy, these unresolved traumas, they just cause more and more inflammation in the body. I always like to use the analogy of, your body's like a bucket of water, and over time, we use thousands of chemicals every day. In our products, in our air, in our water, in our food, in our conversations with one another, in the violence we watch on TV, all these things, right? Things people say to you. Mm-hmm. So little by little, they keep adding up. And there's things that you can do to reduce them. We talked about some of those, right? Like exercise, meditation, talk therapy, whatever. But if you don't do any of those and you keep putting the bad stuff in, the bucket gets more and more full and more full until something makes the whole bucket explode. And I would say, that's called a trigger. So like my parents' divorce, I think, was a trigger for her. It was like 25 years, and then, feeling like you had the rug pulled out from underneath you. She wasn't working before that. So it was just very, feeling, I think, probably pretty panicked about life after that. And your children being your whole purpose and identity, and then kind of being like, now what? And I think because her mental health definitely started to snowball. There were signs after, right around the divorce or afterward, but she was living somewhere else because I was in college. And so I didn't see all of that really until this big manic night.
Right.
And so it probably had been about 2 years of this kind of, really
Gradual
build up. And, just wasn't right in front of me the way that it happened with the episode. But yeah, I would say that the childhood traumas were a huge part of that. And other members of her family have had similar things that they've told me about. They just, it was a tough upbringing for them. And all of them, some of them have been able to deal with things better than others. And she just was not able to go there. I think it was all too painful. And so a lifetime of trying to shove that down and keep that from coming up, it doesn't work.
Yeah. We talk. I talked about this with her the other day. I think it was you. Sorry, the importance of with this whole thing and with me doing this whole thing, I've opened my doors to a lot of people. A lot of people feel more comfortable talking to me, and I've realized there's so many adults that just have so much that they want to say that they've lived their entire life thinking they weren't allowed to say. Even my mother has said things here and there in conversation, and it's like you need to deal, these are all things that need to be dealt with, and there's no age limit to mental health and taking care of your mental health, and you're never too old to change. There could be things that happened to you 50 years ago, and you can still work into releasing that, into working on it. And so you speaking to that, it just makes me want to reiterate that it's never too late to ask for help or to get help.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, the body is so resilient. If you, the same thing applies for food. If you take out bad inputs and put in good ones, or at least just remove the bad, it's like taking a layer of oil off of, a hole. It's like, oh, I can breathe again. Oh my God, thank you so much. Okay, we have this whole, we have a lot of work to do. Let's get going. It'll just fire up again and start working so much better. I mean, people, the stories I've been told, because I film a lot of stories of health recovery through integrated medicine for WellBe. I've filmed over, 40, 50 interviews at this point, but there's so much of that. They'll remove one or just a couple food groups for 2 or 3 weeks after a lifetime of illness or a decade of, psoriasis or something. And the symptoms just start to diminish, or the pain starts to go away. I mean, it's unbelievable. And so the same is true for, traumas and a lot of mental illness type stuff. If you can start to release that, I don't care if it's been 30 years, 10 years, 50 years. I mean, usually the longer it's in there, the more buried and hard to get out it is. Sure. But if you can successfully get it out, then the body responds as if you've removed something it's been allergic to, and can just start to operate and function in a way that you didn't even know was possible, and rebound really well, because it is a brilliant machine if it doesn't have stuff weighing it down. And so it is absolutely never too late.
Yeah. With that being said, if you could kind of just talk a little bit more about, the end. I don't want to say the end, but what happened to your mom?
No, totally fine with that. So about 3.5 years after her manic episode, she was living in Boston because my uncle was her legal guardian at that point, and he was there. And she was living in an apartment very across the street from where he lived, and close to the hospital that she had to go back, have visits at every week or so. And she took her life. So that was about 9 years ago. And, it was just a few days before Christmas. And she was supposed to come down to New York to have Christmas with us. And so it was, even though I knew that she was sort of losing hope and that it was not a good situation and that she just felt horrible on these drugs. I never really thought that was a possibility.
Can I ask, was she still on the drugs at this point?
Yeah.
Okay. So she had never gotten off of them after the manic episode?
No, she had.
Oh, she had?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
In those 3.5 years, she tried to go off of them occasionally because she felt so awful on them.
Right.
And most of those times that resulted in another manic episode. So in those 3.5 years, she was in probably 6 different mental hospitals, like inpatient programs for extended stays, because she kept trying different tactics to feel better and get off the drugs. And it didn't really work out very well. So there was one Christmas during that time, she was like a missing person. She had like run away from, she thought someone was like trying to kill her, and she just basically like disappeared and we couldn't find her. And my dad, at the time, she was in the Washington, D.C. area because her family is originally from Annapolis. And she was on the news in D.C. My dad had put like a missing persons thing because, we couldn't find her. So it was just like two whole weeks, I think, where we had no idea where she was, if she was alive or dead, or we had no idea. She was very resilient. Like, she was really a fighter. So I never, in that 2 weeks, I knew she was alive. I just didn't know where she was. And she was actually found in a library. She was kind of like sleeping in the library.
Wow.
Wow.
Even like with you saying that, it makes you just have, like, at least for me, I'm a very like empathetic person, but it makes me be so much more empathetic for people that like might be on the street somewhere that like kind of look like they're losing it. And and that, now that you say that, like, I've often thought to myself, like, that has to be someone's mom, or that's someone's kid, and they don't have just the access to the help, but it doesn't even sound like the help is all that great either.
If they're really struggling with like delusions or paranoia, it's like they could have run away from a totally comfortable, normal place or life or whatever because they think someone's trying to hurt them or kill them, and it's not true, obviously, but that's what's going on in their head, and so they don't know where to go, and they're afraid to go home or whatever because of this idea in their head. So yeah, it was wild to think that like my mom was probably seen as like a homeless person for those 2 weeks by anybody that walked by her. It was just such a bizarre couple of years. But so she died, and it was so painful. And I was at the time applying to business school, and my applications were due in like 2 weeks. And I'd been working on this for like over a year. I mean, I'd gotten all the recommendations from my supervisors at work. I'd studied for and taken the GMAT like 3 times. I had written all these essays for like 4 different schools, and it was just a lot. And it was like right down to the finish line, and I didn't know, if I could actually finish it. But I kind of ripped up everything that I'd written, and my friends helped me to actually like, no, you're so close. Like, come on, just submit it. Like, because all the deadlines, don't miss them. Just get something out. And I wrote about the fact that I wanted to fix the broken healthcare system because I felt like the lack of interest by the doctors in every single one of these facilities in actually figuring out any of the root causes or trying to like heal her body was shocking and disgusting to me. And I know that that's also a product of where conventional mental health is right now. There just isn't that kind of a mentality or those kinds of answers because it's mostly just a pharmaceutical based model, which inherently can't heal things unless you're killing something, right? Like the only drug on earth that fully heals anything is when you have like an infection and maybe it can kill the infection, right? Like an antibiotic. Everything else is just like a long, drawn out thing because it just manages the symptom. It can't really reverse the issue.
Right.
So I know that that's, you know, maybe the best that they had at that time. But to me, it was just also such a lack of interest in really getting someone's life back. It was like, all right, well, we don't want them to kill anyone else, so we'll just kind of make them a vegetable so that they can't.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, is that really a solution? Like, this is a life too.
Right.
Like, don't you want this person and their family to get back on their feet? Like, you know, just drooling and shaking and what, you know, isn't really a life.
No.
And so now, you know, I'm able to learn about and interview and research and stuff like these different, very different kinds of psychiatrists who are thinking so differently about these kinds of issues. And again, I don't know what I would have done differently because we were so panicked, you know, standing on the street in the middle of the night in the middle of Queens. Like, I don't, you know, know if it really would have changed the fact that I called the police. But I know that mental health care is changing. And for most people, it's really this new kind of mental health care, you know, holistic psychiatry or functional psychiatry is completely inaccessible. Like, they can't find practitioners and doctors who practice this way, or they're just exorbitantly expensive because they're outside the insurance system. But it has to be the standard of care in America. And so I like to think that, you know, this horrible experience kind of fired me up to bring that to a lot more people and make that the norm, whether it takes 20 years or 50 years. You know, I hope that that's really where it's going. I know I'm up against some pretty powerful companies who would like that to not be the case.
Yeah, but you're laying the groundwork, and it's not even, you know, about alternative medicines or treatments. You're sort of like imploring people to look within now. And
Yes.
to make these 100, you know, choices a day now
Yes.
to avoid anything like that down the road. And that's what's pretty amazing about your concept. And, you know, I mean, if you want to speak a little bit to that, I think that could very well help somebody listening right now.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you kind of brought that back around because a lot of the work that I do now is about prevention and just getting to things and getting to the root causes of things before they are full-blown illnesses or manic episodes or whatever, whether that's resolving childhood traumas or looking at the food you eat and understanding like all the different things it's affecting, or understanding if you have like mold toxicity and like that could be the cause of your depression. But if you don't know what you're looking for because you don't have the kind of doctor who would test for those things, then you might not even realize that and be on an antidepressant for like a decade with all kinds of consequences. So yeah, it's a big inspiration for me to not only help people once they have chronic health issues, whether they're mental or physical, to find practitioners and doctors who are going to think differently about their care and really be a partner and like, I'm going to help you heal. I'm not just interested in like
Seeing if this drug works.
Exactly. Or just turning you into kind of a vegetable because like, at least, you know, that's not manic or something, or like calling that a solution. It's not. But also helping people before they even get there. You know, when there were so many signs and opportunities throughout the 61 years that my mom was alive, like where she, you know, had there been a different kind of doctor or someone who could help her in a lot of different ways to kind of undo some of these hormonal imbalances or gut issues or childhood traumas, like something like this may never have come this far, you know? It could have been thwarted so much earlier. So yeah, that's really, you know, what happened. I did end up going to business school
Okay.
and in Chicago, and the whole time I was there trying to talk to, you know, anybody that I could about
Anything.
integrative medicine, and they all were like, what are you talking about? Or wellness. No one talked about wellness. They were like, you mean wearables? Like that's what people thought wellness was back then, because there was also like no Instagram when I started. Like, it was just a really different time. Goop was like just starting. Like it was just different. Like no one even knew what that was. Now wellness means so many different things to different people, and it's like trendy and not really what I thought it was. But yeah, it was a rude awakening to me that there weren't a lot of people involved in that, which has been really awesome to see how far we've come since I first went to business school, which was 8 years ago, to see that so many more people understand and have destigmatized the idea of functional and integrative medicine, and that it's not woo-woo hippie whack weirdo stuff. It's like grounded in a lot of science actually, and there's beginning to be a ton of research on the different components of it. And also it just makes more sense that you would actually want to heal things instead of just manage them forever. And that symptoms, whether it's a manic episode in your brain or pain in your arm, like these are all different cries for help. Like every single time you feel a symptom, it's your body being like, hey, what you're doing's not working.
Right.
Help me.
And sometimes that's like you banged your arm. Okay, that's why it hurt. But most of the time it's like something you're eating routinely or putting on your skin routinely, or there's something dust you're allergic to in your apartment, or all these things. Or some toxic person you have in your life that you're not able to get rid of.
Energy.
I feel
Yeah.
attacked. No,
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
And all these things are, if you actually pay attention to them, they're all these little signs, again, that you can do something about so much earlier before you end up on the sidewalk in the middle of the night with your kids, like being put into an ambulance because you're losing your mind.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
Right.
So unfortunately, we are definitely running out of time. We're over an hour. I know time passes by quickly. So what we like to do is wrap up with just advice that you would give. For you, we touched a lot of different important things, and you kind of gave advice throughout. But if there's any final last words that you want to say and get out there.
Yeah. Do your research. Like, no one's fully responsible for you and your body in the healthcare system or anywhere else. Like, you are the CEO of your health, of your body, of your life, and you have to be empowered to be able to say no to things that don't feel right, to trust your gut instinct, to have triple checks on anything that might be done to you or your body. And also to take the personal responsibility that comes with knowing, as we were just talking about, that the 100 choices you make are really your healthcare every single day. So when you're making too many bad choices, maybe don't be surprised, if bad health outcomes come out of that. But also never forget that, the body, as we mentioned, is extremely resilient. And so you can turn things around so easily if you just start treating your body kindly, with nourishment and with positivity, as we were talking about, and empathy and all these different, attributes that the body craves and needs. So I'd say be empowered, get help when you need it. If you don't know much about food or wellness or healthcare or whatever, there are resources, a lot of them out there. The internet is infinite, whether it's, Wellbe, something like My Site, which has a lot of content, or any other, fabulous ones out there. But then, show up for yourself every day, have the decency to treat your body right so that it can work for you. It really wants to. It's almost like an employee, like if you shit all over somebody, they're probably not going to want to work for you very well. And they probably won't.
Yeah.
Either they'll quit or they'll just be not
Terrible.
great for a
Yeah.
while. And that's exactly what that's like. So those would be my pieces of advice.
I think that's
Brilliant.
perfect. Yeah.
Yes.
We'll definitely put the link to your information either on our Instagram or on our channel somewhere, so that if someone's interested in things that you're saying, I know it's getwellbe.com.
Yep.
They can reach out to you there. And and we appreciate you coming on and talking to us. There's a lot of things that I personally am taking away. So I know that there's definitely going to be other people that are going to be taking away some valuable things from this as well.
Absolutely.
So yeah, thank you guys for listening. If you're not doing so already, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, For the Haters on all, For the Haters with a Y. So yeah, thanks guys.
Thank you guys so much for having me. Thank you.
For the haters, come on, do it now or later. Whoa, yeah. It don't matter what your name is, share your story. We'll be waiting. Go.